For several years, H. Spencer Lewis prepared for the resurgence of the Rosicrucian order in America. In May 1913, his wife Molly died as a result of appendicitis. He was profoundly affected by her passing, which shattered his family life. In the same year, following circumstances that remain little known, H. Spencer Lewis began corresponding with Eugène Dupré, the secretary of the Essenian Temple, a Martinist lodge in Egypt. Before moving to Cairo, this Parisian Martinist had attended groups directed by Pappus. In a letter dated July 23, 1913, Eugène Dupré sent to H. Spencer Lewis the rituals and initiation certificates necessary for the creation of a Martinist lodge in America. It seems that the onset of the War of 1914 to 1918 put an end to this project. In December 1913, Lewis confided to members of the New York Institute for Psychical Research his intention of establishing the Rosicrucian order in America, and he invited them to a meeting. However, more time was needed to see this project come to fruition. After a difficult period, Lewis began to see the hints of a new day. In the middle of 1914, he married Martha Morfier, a young woman whom he had met a few months previously. This understanding spouse accompanied him unobtrusively in his great project of restoring Rosicrucianism. Indeed, a few months later, events began to unfold, and a meeting held on Thursday, April 1, 1915, culminated in the official founding of the ancient and mystical order Rosicrucis, Amorc, in America. H. Spencer Lewis was elected to head this order, which, under his direction, would experience a rapid development. In the following months, other lodges were established in Philadelphia, Boston, Wilmerding, Pennsylvania, Altoona, Rochester, Harlan, Iowa, and Detroit. In January 1916, H. Spencer Lewis launched the American Rosicrucis, a monthly magazine for Rosicrucians that was dedicated to science, philosophy, and religion. Until his death in 1939, he regularly wrote articles on Rosicrucian philosophy and mysticism for this magazine, which changed its name several times until it became the Rosicrucian Digest in 1929. Apart from the articles that he wrote on subjects concerning spirituality, Lewis sometimes expressed his opinion concerning different leaders in the world of esotericism. This is where he severely criticized Aleister Crowley, whom he described as a black magician who had nothing to do with Rosicrucianism. In 1926, H. Spencer Lewis, whose mind was endlessly bubbling over with ideas, began to engage in new activities. One of his projects was to set up a radio station that would broadcast special programming. He did not want this to be a source of propaganda for Amorc, but rather a tool dedicated to the arts, culture, and spirituality in general. In 1903, he had constructed a radio apparatus, and in November 1913, he had obtained an operating license. He was thus in possession of all the elements allowing this experiment to be placed in the service of his ideal. The radio station was soon in operation, and in April 1927, the Mystic Triangle, Amorc's magazine, made reference to the order's broadcasting activities. Once again, H. Spencer Lewis gave proof of his creativity by introducing a new trend, in this instance by engaging the listeners by means of the telephone, and he would follow this with other innovations that would soon be copied by numerous radio stations. In November 1927, Amorc established its headquarters in San Jose, California. This was the beginning of activities at Rosicrucian Park, whose architecture was inspired by ancient Egypt. Soon afterwards, an Egyptian museum was opened. Recognized by the International Council of Museums, ICOM, and by the Egyptian National Museum of Cairo, it has welcomed millions of guests over the years and remains the largest Egyptian museum in Western North America. At the beginning of the 1930s, Amorc's development was such that H. Spencer Lewis had become the leader of a worldwide organization. He felt that it had become necessary to create an international Supreme Council, the World Council, composed of those individuals who directed the order in different parts of the world: France, Denmark, the Netherlands, Canada, Puerto Rico, Bolivia, Australia, Sweden, England, China, and Poland. Among these members, we may note the presence of the Russian painter Nicholas Roerich, who had apparently become a member of the order in 1929, the period in which he was proposed as a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. H. Spencer Lewis related that he had met Nicholas Roerich at the inauguration of the Roerich Museum in New York in October 1929. The two men were on such friendly terms that Nicholas Roerich was named Amorc's legate and was charged with carrying out certain missions for the order. In 1934, during an expedition across China and Mongolia to find plants capable of combating the desertification of the American prairies, Roerich stopped at Harbin in order to meet his Rosicrucian compatriots. The local press related the Rosicrucian activities that he had participated in during his stay in China. In 1929, H. Spencer Lewis published several books, including Rosicrucian Questions and Answers, which presented the order through a series of questions and answers, as well as its history. Then, The Mystical Life of Jesus, an essay on the mystical life of Christ, a subject he would return to in a later publication. Always preoccupied with adapting the traditional teachings to modern life, he also wrote Self-Mastery and Fate with the Cycles of Life, an original work that proposed a method for understanding all matters, allowing people to regulate their lives by using the planetary and biological cycles that mark their existence. Although endowed with a penetrating, ever-restless mind, Lewis did not lack a sense of humor, and during conversations he loved to slip in humorous maxims that set off volleys of laughter. This big-hearted man knew how to maintain an exemplary simplicity despite his important responsibilities. A musician from an early age, he skillfully played the cello and piano. He was also an excellent painter who created works whose themes were intimately associated with his centers of interest. Thus, one of the oldest pieces that has come down to us, Arabian Nights, evokes the Orient. Egypt was for him an inexhaustible source of inspiration, and many of his pictures were dedicated to this land, such as The Love Idol, or the inspiring Entrance to Karnak Temple, Luxor, which he painted on the spot during a trip in 1929. Esotericism was never absent from his canvases, as can be seen in The Alchemist, completed a few months before his death.